Dylan Samberg has signed an extension with the Winnipeg Jets, but I don't think the contract is quite as good as a lot of us were hoping.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, the big news earlier was that Dylan Samberg has signed a new contract, and to be honest, I don't think a lot of us are as thrilled with it as we were expecting. Obviously, it's great to have Dylan coming back, and I think we were all very excited about it, but the contract term is rather concerning. To me, it almost reads like the Jets maybe don't quite have things as in order as I would really like. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about some of the strange stuff that's happening with all of this Jets offseason, what's kind of left for Winnipeg to sort out, and how all of this really kind of plays into what I'm starting to feel like is a bit of an uncertain future for the Jets. But before we dive into that, did want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, like I said, Dylan Samberg has signed a contract extension. It is 3 years at about $5.75 million per season. So already right off the bat for a 3-year deal, the AAV is a little on the higher side. Arbitration, the Jets had a $2.5 million figure, and Samberg was coming in at $6 million. So you would have gotten somewhere in the 4.5 range, meeting halfway between the two parties. But what I think really stands out for this deal immediately is it's not long-term, and it takes him into his UFA years right as they really start. And so I'm just kind of looking at all of this, and I'm a little concerned because I feel like this whole summer, all we've heard was that Samberg was interested in signing long-term. The Jets were planning to get this done. He's considered a very cornerstone franchise piece. And then earlier this week, we got the news that both parties were filing for arbitration and that negotiations really didn't seem to be going that well. And here we are now on Wednesday, obviously in the aftermath of everything. Samberg inked his contract before the negotiations for arbitration started. And so I kind of feel like Winnipeg has screwed this one up. I don't often feel like the Jets get contracts wrong, but this one absolutely is one where I think that the team kind of needs to be held accountable for this. Now, I get that Samberg may be wanting to bet on himself a bit, but if he was asking for $7 million for 7 years, who knows the exact term that he would have been comfortable signing for, I just don't know why you don't commit to it. Samberg is, quite frankly, one of this team's 5 most important players, and there's no getting around that when he's injured or out, this team is like a 500 team at best. When he's in, they are so much better as a team because it's not just Samberg being good himself. He stabilizes almost Winnipeg's entire defensive structure alongside Pionk. And when he's out, it suddenly elevates guys who are probably not second-pairing defenders. It takes away Pionk's partner who actually helps Pionk really perform at an elite level, at least on the surface. And Samberg, is such a strong transition presence, a very safe outlet passer, a guy who breaks the puck out of the D zone pretty frequently. He just does everything for this team. And arguably, when you look at defensive impact, he was Winnipeg's number 1 defensive defender this past season. And so I'm like kind of baffled that it got to this point because the Jets really had all of their ducks in a row to sign what should have been a long-term contract. As the league is changing and we see all of these teams trying to lock up their kids early because they know that the cap going up is not going to be great for them in the future. They're taking these bets and they're really investing in their cores. And so I'm just wondering how it got to this point that all you get out of this is a 3-year deal. Now, make no mistake, 3 years is much better than a 1 year, $6 million arbitration sort of thing. I will not dispute that, and I think anyone who does is being a little bit silly. But, you also look at the 3-year deal, and it really doesn't do the Jets many favors. Honestly, I'm kind of like confused because if the Jets really believe that the score is the one that's going to get it done, wouldn't you want to lock it up? Wouldn't you try to go long term? You already did it with Pionk. You've done it with Velarde. So why didn't you do it with Samberg? Was it really just Sandberg's camp, or were the Jets trying to come in and undercut his contract offer by too much of an amount that he didn't really feel comfortable doing? And so I'm a little frustrated. This felt like one of the contracts that I really wasn't worried about, and yet here it is now. We find out that it's come to pass. It's really not that great of a deal for Winnipeg, and so obviously 3 years, nothing to sniff at. It gives the Jets time. And I think the reality of the situation is if the Jets the next couple of years really start a bit of a decline, and that is very possible, don't get me wrong, it is a thing that is potentially on the horizon. You look at a situation of maybe needing to trade Samberg, and the contract that he's on is extremely trade friendly. It would bring in probably a pretty big haul for Winnipeg. And again, that's like a really extreme situation. The Jets would have to be kind of needing to sell. But, obviously I've reserved some time later this episode to really talk about the Jets' future because as we sit here and see some of these contracts and see some of the weird stuff the Jets are doing, I'm not quite sure I get the direction the team is going. I've talked at length about, the prospect pool that they've got, their need to either be aggressive or, if they don't see what they want, then to just kind of consider maybe selling off some assets at the trade deadline, especially if the season's not a slam dunk. But looking a lot further ahead, I'm starting to wonder how committed the Jets really feel to this core. Some of these contracts don't really feel like we are getting Winnipeg's most bought in version of the team. So there are some real big questions. The Samberg one, at least, is the can's been kicked down the road, so to speak. And I feel like the Jets do this a lot. But to do this now with a second straight RFA after you did it with Perfetti, I'm not really sure what the plan is. Most smart teams that have been perennial playoff contenders and cup contenders have been signing their kids young and locking them up for many years. So why are the Jets not doing this? What is their holdup, and why do they not feel comfortable taking these bets? I don't personally understand it. When the league is moving in a different direction and the Jets seem to be kind of stuck in their ways, to me, it just feels like, Winnipeg is scared of making the commitment. And yet we see them make that commitment to a guy like Neil Pionk, who, look, I love Pionk. He's a nice guy. He's a great stand-up player, but he is not worth 7x7. He's just not. That pairing was really defined a lot by Samberg being one of the most secret and most elite second pairing defenders in the league. And so all of this to say that it's just really disappointing that all they could get out of this is a 3-year deal when I really thought we were going to see 6 or 7. This should have been where the Jets were going. They haven't. And so it kind of feels like a really big missed opportunity. And now in 3 years, we're going to have the same conversation again. And the Jets may be in a very different place. So we'll talk a little bit about how all of this is sort of factoring into the offseason so far. But before we dive into that, did want to let you know that obviously tonight's episode is brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there logging on early and waiting for our tickets. Obviously, no one wants to, have a situation where you lose your spot, right? You maybe click the wrong button, you get out of line, and that show you've been dying to see sells out almost instantly. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop the closer you get to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. Now, I've done Gametime when I was looking for Ravens playoff tickets. fantastic. I got to see where my seat view was. I got to get a panoramic view, and all the prices were up front, so I didn't get hit with surprise fees and charges when I was checking out. And of course, if you're worried about your plans changing, the Game Time guarantee has you covered with cancellation protection and more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL $20 Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are chatting a little bit about the rest of Winnipeg's offseason. Obviously, the Dylan Samberg deal was one of the most important things for the Jets to wrap up, but it really wasn't the only thing. And there is a very big contract that kind of has to be sorted out really before the season starts. And you'll look at it and say, well, Harrison, this contract has another year left on it. Why is there sudden urgency? Let me tell you, Kyle Connor cannot go into the season without some plan for what to do with his future. KFC is one of those players for this Jets team that really defines the direction of the franchise. I put him on the level of Scheifele and Hellebuck in terms of how the franchise sees them and how important his cap hit or whatever it's going to be going forward is really going to be for determining what the Jets have to work with going forward. And his next deal is already, we're talking, honestly, something in the 9-digit range, probably 12, or sorry, not 9-digit, 8-digit. We're probably looking at 12 million in that range. I've heard anywhere from 11 to 12, maybe a little higher than 12. And that's not a contract the Jets have ever handed out. This is like a kind of commitment that Winnipeg simply has never made before. And it's sort of a new era for the league, so we don't really have a lot that's comparable. But if you're talking about the Jets committing to a 29-year-old expiring free agent wing who honestly has enough cosmetic issues to where you wonder if you're really getting that full $12 million in value, it's a really big, risky deal. I don't think it's that clear-cut. I do like Connor's game, especially this past year. I think that this career season for him in terms of his overall play and what he did was awesome and really first-line caliber, but I don't know if it's repeatable. I don't know how much of what we saw this year is going to be the Kyle Connor that you get for the next several years. And when you are spending this much money on a player like Connor, it just has a lot of natural risk. I mean, this is a style of play that's really reliant on his skating. And once he hits 30 and starts moving into those early 30s years, what version of Connor will we see? And that's a really tough question to answer. Now, do I think for the first several years he'll continue to be very, productive and very good? Yeah, I really don't worry about that. And if you think that the Jets have a contention window for the next few years, you're not really sweating it. I guess my thing is if you commit and go down this road, it really locks in how this Jets team is constructed going forward. And it means that you probably commit to the top line, not really changing. You commit to this approach that the Jets coaching staff has where they don't really make a lot of changes. And so I just don't know if I really like that. I think that the team has reached the summit of what it can accomplish with an incredible President's Trophy season, one of the most magical regular seasons we've had in recent memory, and a very short playoff trip. And that, for me, is hard to reconcile because I think this team is capable of more. And if Connor was maybe willing to not play next to Scheifele for once, I would feel differently about all of this. But in terms of how the Jets tend to be constructed, I'm not really sure how all of this is going to lock into place the further we get into, the next several years of this Jets team. And, correct me if I'm wrong, but, I really get the feeling that Winnipeg is trying to make this core last as long as it can. But I think we are starting to get to a point where there are some really hard questions and harder realities for the team to grapple with. Look at the age on spot track for all of the Jets forwards. You don't really see many guys under 30. A lot of the newcomers are over 30. A lot of the guys who have big contracts for the most part outside of Velarde probably are in their early to mid 30s. And, you are starting to see this team get a little bit on the older and slower side. The Jets probably had one of their best chances to win the cup this past season. And, we saw how that went. Um, if the trade deadline had maybe gone differently, maybe things would have gone differently. I don't know. Obviously you can spend lots of assets and bring in some big players and it still doesn't work out. But I think, to me, it felt like a real missed opportunity. And to see what happened in the playoffs, especially against the Stars, a lot of what Dallas did against the Jets really came off of the two players that they traded for. And so it all kind of feels like we are coming to a point with this team where this Kyle Connor contract really, has massive implications for the present of the team, for the future of the team, and for how the squad is going to be going forward. As far as any of the rumors are concerned, no one has said any differently that Connor wants to go anywhere else. As far as anyone knows, he's pretty happy to lock up with the Jets. And I've pretty much prepared myself for this being the reality. I don't think that there's any reason to doubt a Connor extension. But seeing as how the Samberg deal just kind of went kind of south, relatively speaking, I don't know what to expect with this one. Maybe they were nickel and diming Samberg because they know that they have to pay Connor a crap load of money, and maybe it's higher than I was originally thinking. But I just, I don't really get the way that the Jets are emphasizing and prioritizing some of these contract extensions. Doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I'll be honest. And the can being kicked down the road partly doesn't really set them up for a lot of success once you hit the 27-28 season. That's when you have some really big questions to answer, and none of them are easy. But at least for the rest of this offseason, the Kyle Connor thing has to be figured out. After this season, Cole Perfetti is going to need another deal of some sort. So, yeah, this is going to be a very weird next 2 years. And the Kyle Connor contract just feels like it could either be the thing that makes or breaks the Jets. And I love this team, but I think, there's some writing on the wall for where we're going with the squad. And unless the Jets really have a massive trade or just game-breaking, earth-shattering deal somewhere waiting in the wings, I think we are looking at a team whose prognosis is probably not great for the foreseeable future. As much as I really want to believe in this team's ability to learn from how things have gone and really start to implement the youth and get the squad going, I'm not even expecting a lot of the kids to play this season. Outside of maybe one or two rookies. And if you are really trying to draft and develop and make the most of these ELCs, bringing in a bunch of veterans to fill in roster spots who probably don't move the needle very much, rather than just trying to give your kids a real chance to succeed, doesn't really feel like you're going in a very good direction. So, yeah, if I have to really grade this offseason, it's gone from kind of like being okay to I'm in the C territory. I don't know how all y'all feel. Would love to hear your feedback and comments. How do you feel this offseason has gone? The Velarde deal, objectively very good. I think that that's a nice one for both sides. I'm happy about that one. No sweat there. Barron deal, it's whatever, Some of the other contracts have been fine-ish, I guess. But the Samberg one, that was one where I really felt the Jets couldn't screw it up, and I think they kind of did. Not entirely on, just on them to, all the responsibility for that decision might have been Samberg's camp too. But, if the amount that we're thinking that could have maybe gotten that long-term deal done wasn't met, I just, I'm really struggling with it. And I feel like this has just been not really the offseason that you should have coming off of a President's Trophy season. If you really believe that this team is a winner and that you can win the cup with this squad, then everything that we have seen up until now really doesn't back that up. So starting to think the Jets may have a very different assessment of the squad than what they have publicly said so far, or maybe they just don't really get it. I don't really know that I believe that one. I think the team is seeing some stuff with this squad and really with the future of the team. And they are maybe coming to some similar assessments that I have. with where the squad's going. And I want to spend some time talking about that because I think it's really complicated. Where this Jets team is starting to project as we look closer and closer at the next several years, it could start to look a little bit like the New York Islanders. And, I think the Jets have a lot of advantages over the Islanders compared to that team and what they just went through. But it's hard to say that Winnipeg is going to end up much better at the end of all this. So I want to talk about the future, what I really hope for the best case scenario, and what we could be seeing if things really start to cave in and the Jets maybe can't break out of some of this rut. But we'll chat about that coming right up. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thanks for rejoining us as we are chatting a little bit about, all the contract stuff that has happened this Jets offseason so far. Some longer-term concerns are really starting to pop up with how the Jets are currently doing things. I want to talk about the next couple of years because I think the future for this Jets team is starting to look a lot murkier than I thought. And I'm starting to wonder if the Jets are maybe anticipating somewhere over the next couple of years that this team really starts to struggle a bit. We aren't seeing, some of the bigger commitments than, that we'd sort of expect. Cole Perfetti didn't get that big contract a while back. Samberg now has gotten a 3-year bridgey-ish kind of deal. And I look at, the contracts and when they expire. 27-28 is going to be a really big year for the Jets. Morrissey's going to be up for extension. DeMello will probably be in the last year of his NHL career if, maybe, not the last year, but in one of the final years of his NHL career. You've got some serious money coming off the books the previous season. And so, Lowry, obviously, after this year, he's a UFA. And so this 2 to 3 year window that we were talking about as being more of a competitive window, starting to feel like it's not going to be that. Increasingly, I get the sense the Jets look at the next couple of seasons preparing for maybe a scenario where they have to dismantle some things. And, I don't know how I feel about that because, the Jets have come really far already with this core. And obviously there are certainly some concerns that I have with its ability to maybe reach that next level. But I kind of feel like in some ways, maybe the Jets are not necessarily investing as much into this team as I thought they would. I really thought coming off of a President's Trophy season that this offseason and this summer would be a huge opportunity for the Jets to try and swing for the fences. They didn't really agree. They haven't done that. Fair enough. In terms of the free agents out there, I wouldn't really have wanted them to spend loads of money on a Besser necessarily. So that's fine. I wouldn't really be too upset about that. But they haven't really made big trades. They've got like 9 defenders under contract and 3 or 4 of them are fighting for the same third pairing spots. And I don't really understand that. And their big signing is Jonathan Toews. And Toews, in terms of the leadership and stuff, certainly that's worth, a good signing. But the player at this stage of his career, we really don't know what he's going to be. And he might be asked to be the 2C. So all of this to me doesn't really feel like the Jets have the clearest picture of what the next few years are going to look like. And, as much as I've hyped up the Jets prospect pool, I think it's really important to consider that Jets prospect pool is more middle six to depth players. We don't really have a lot of high-end elite talent. I think Yeager could be really good. Salamonson might be really good. Lambert, he's kind of a wild card, and Shibrikov could be a nice middle sixer, but you don't really have blue chip prospects that are slam dunk franchise level players. We don't really know if any of them are going to be top liners. Walton might have significant upside and he could reach that level, but that is, again, a guy who's like, what, a 5th or a 6th round pick? You're not really asking him to be the standard bearer for your franchise. And so I just wonder what exactly this Jets squad is planning for the future. I really can't tell from their moves. What I do feel is that the Jets are also not really sure themselves, because you look at how they've signed a lot of these guys this offseason, you look at all these stopgap sort of deals, and it really does feel like Winnipeg's sort of bracing for something. And if the Jets start to decline rapidly and things maybe slow down, maybe Hellebuck starts not being Hellebuck as we know him. Maybe Scheifele and Morrissey start to slow down a little bit earlier than expected. This Jets team could start to look more and more like a team that needs to maybe, start tearing it down in the following seasons. Now, I don't think that this is going to be anything imminent. Don't get me, wrong here. I think this is a little further out, but I think we're starting to get to some of those age ranges where you're having these conversations. I think this past season was probably one of the big last swings for this Jets team to really make a deep cup run, and they made a heck of a run. They really did, but it didn't last super, super long. And I think we saw the level of what the Panthers are and where the Jets are at, and these are not really close. And so, I just wonder if Winnipeg itself has maybe thought about the future and what it needs to really reach that elite level. And maybe they're trying to sort of navigate around that with a cap that's going up significantly, which doesn't favor Winnipeg. A prospect pool of young kids who might fill in a lot of the gaps that they've had, the past couple of years. And, maybe there are some, RFAs out there that they're looking at and thinking about maybe taking a stab at trying to bring in some guys who could really change the roster composition and look at this team, but maybe they need some time to make that all happen. And so, I don't really know where this team's going. And this is kind of like one of those scenarios where I would like to have optimism about it, but the way that the Jets are starting to do some things, I don't know how I feel about it just yet. So this year feels like it could be the transition season I thought last year was going to be. I thought last season Winnipeg was going to bring in more kids. I thought maybe they would try and retool a little bit on the fly. Winnipeg kind of isn't signaling a lot right now. So we'll have to wait for this Kyle contract to get, finished and ironed out. What he wants to do and what he signs for, I think, will be a really big bellwether for whether the Jets are trying to commit to this core as it is, or if they think we need to start looking at really swinging for a big lottery pick because, this team is not in the best state with the forward talent. We have a lot of UFAs coming up over the next few years, and you look at who we've got, waiting in the wings, and I don't know that we see a ton of really high-end goal-scoring talent. So, the Jets are going to have to start getting creative, and this could be a weird next few seasons for the Jets. And I don't want to be negative about it. I just think it's time to be a little realistic about what the outlook of this team is. And, we are seeing a team that's getting older. A lot of guys on the wrong side of 30. And we know what happens with those teams when you start trying to lock those teams and cores up. You end up like the Islanders. I don't know that the Jets are going to do that necessarily, and I'm hoping that they've kind of learned from the Wheeler contract to avoid that. But it is a scenario that's out there if things, the Jets try to keep things rolling as long as possible and running it back as much as possible. That could be a very real scenario. So I would encourage the Jets to just be flexible. Don't lock yourselves into anything outside of some of your core young players and guys like Samberg, who really you need to commit to. The rest I wouldn't feel as attached to. So we'll see how this all pans out. This is going to be a weird summer, man. This upcoming season, I don't really know what to expect. I think the Jets will still be a reasonably good team, but who knows in the following years. So curious to know your thoughts on this. Do you feel like the Jets have a clear plan? Do you feel like it's been illustrated at any level? Drop your thoughts in comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's show, though, that's all the time that we have. I thank you for listening. We will see you back here tomorrow with even more off-season discussions. But for tonight's show, that's it. Thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.